As you know, we are reading this week the Parashah of Yitro, which records the unique event of God coming down on Mount Sinai to give his beloved people his Torah. And of course, we celebrate this event every year, the Festival of Shavuot. It was a unique moment in history. It was the pinnacle of man's religious experience. Mount Sinai stands out physically and spiritually. And yet, have you ever asked yourself the question, we celebrate Shavuot, but when do we make a pilgrimage to Mount Sinai? It's such a holy location. But are we required to go there to appear before the Lord? No. You say, well, it's impossible anyway. You couldn't make a pilgrimage to Sinai and go through Arab lands. Maybe today not, but in the past, in biblical times, people could move easily from Canaan to Egypt and then on to Sinai if they chose. Under Roman rule, it was all part of the one empire, and there were not hard borders. You could move from one country to another. And even under Muslim rule in the Middle Ages, there was freedom of movement. Jews could go from Baghdad to Barcelona, travelling exclusively through Arab territory. But no one goes to Mount Sinai. The place had a sanctity of the event, but there was no sanctity in the location. And yet, we know at least of one pilgrim who went to Har Sinai. Elijah the prophet, that mystical, remarkable man who would not experience death. He'll go up to heaven alive in a fiery chariot. And it is he, God says, that I will send to you before the advent of the Messiah. But he didn't have a happy life. He lived in the northern kingdom of Israel under the rule of a weak individual called Ahab and his pernicious Palestinian princess, a Canaanite, called Jezebel. And she was determined to eradicate the worship of the one true God. She was going to supplant it with the worship of her god Baal. And she came literally with hundreds of prophets, of priests, to impose her faith upon the Israelites. And they were reasonably willing. And she set about slaughtering the priests and prophets of the one true God in the hundreds. She destroyed the altars of God throughout the land. And she was unstoppable. Ahab did nothing to prevent this from happening. However, she hadn't counted on the one prophet that was left, Elijah. And he issued a challenge to the prophets and priests of Baal. Meet me at Mount Carmel, and there we will have a competition. Each one of us will offer up sacrifices to our God, but not adding any fire. The God who answers with fire, he is the one true God. And so the Canaanites build their altars to Baal, and they throw themselves around and mutilate themselves the whole day, and they pray. Of course, no response. Then it's Elijah's turn. He calmly rebuilds the altar of God that had been destroyed, places his offering upon the altar, and says to God, now answer me. And a fire came down and consumed the whole lot. And the people cried out, Adonai hu Elohim, Adonai hu Elohim, the Lord, he is God. Okay, says Elijah, now arrest these prophets and priests of Baal. There are 850 of them. And he personally kills them. He executes each one. On hearing this, Jezebel was not well pleased, and she sends a messenger to Elijah. This time tomorrow I'll have your head on a plate. So he has to flee. He's now a fugitive from the KGB. But where can he go? takes himself on a 40-day journey, 40 days, 40 nights, to Horeb, to Mount Sinai. Perhaps he went there because nobody ever went there. They wouldn't think of looking for him there. No. He went there for an encounter with God, to that place where God had once appeared for the most momentous encounter in history. And he's there. And he spends the night in the very cave that Moses had stood centuries earlier when God passed before him in all his splendor. And there Elijah waits. And sure enough, God speaks to him and says, Elijah, what are you doing here? Well, doesn't God know what he's doing there? Of course he does, but you'll see the significance of the question soon. And he tells him his whole sad story, and it is indeed a sad story. And God says, come outside. I'm going to show you something. And God passes before Elijah, as he did for Moses, in splendor, awesome splendor. First of all, there is a howling, fierce wind which shatters mountains and stones, but God is not in the way. Then he passes by in a tempest which could uproot trees, but God is not in the tempest. Finally, he passes by in fire, but God is still not in the fire. And only after all this display, Elijah hears a call to Mamadaka, a still small voice saying to him, what are you doing here, man? I've got work for you to do. Why are you sitting around here? I want you to go to Syria. I want you to introduce there a coup d'etat. Anoint Hazael as king of Syria. He'll get rid of the current king. Go back to your native Israel. Anoint Jehu ben Nimshi as king. Another coup d'etat. And he will deal with Ahab and Jezebel. And finally, anoint Elisha as your successor. And he'll deal with all of them. So I say to you, what are you doing here? You've got responsibilities. You've got tasks to complete. Get over yourself, man, and get on with your life and get on with my task. And of course he does. And he's eminently successful. Now I think all of us, well, most of us, experience an Elijah moment in our lives where we're surrounded by problems, by difficulties we're just not able to solve. And they threaten to engulf us. And we know the isolation, the desolation that Elijah knew. But I think it's at that moment God comes and speaks to us. God speaks to us. I've never heard him speak. Well, yes, you have. Up here. Some people call it conscience. I call it the voice of God. It says to you, don't do this, it's unworthy of you. Or it will say to you, do this, it's your duty. That's the Kol Mamadaka, that's the still small voice of God. And in your circumstances where you are absolutely dismayed and overwhelmed, he'll give you the Elijah message. It says to us, you have lives to live, people that you're responsible for, duties you must perform. So get over yourself and get on with it. And remember that whilst you do what you must do, I will do for you what I can do. You are not at any time deserted. For when you will cry out to me, I will answer you, and I will be with you in your time of stress. So, my friends, keep listening. That voice is still talking to you. He may grant us all peace of mind.